There is a deer missing from the edge of your yard. You may not have noticed yet, the group still comes at dusk, the same tree line, the same soft emergence into the last light, the same unhurried grazing at the back of the property. From the kitchen window it looks the same as it always has. But it is not the same. One of them is gone, and the ones who remain know it in ways that would stop you completely if you understood what you were watching. They have changed how they move. They have changed where they stand. They have changed the order in which they step out of the trees and the amount of time they spend looking back at the place where one of them no longer appears. They are doing things in the hours after a loss that researchers are only beginning to document, things that look from the outside like ordinary deer behavior, but are in fact something that no one who watches them should be able to call ordinary again. The deer at the edge of your yard are not just grazing, they are doing something much harder than that, and tonight you are going to understand what it is. Welcome back to Hidden Backyard Wildlife, the channel where we sit with the small wild lives that share our yards and try to understand what they understand about the world. If you are new here, make sure you subscribe before this video is over, because what you are about to learn is going to permanently change the way you watch the deer emerge from the treeline at dusk. Today we are walking through 8 things deer do when one of their group does not come back, what those behaviors tell us about how their social world works, and why the quiet animals you have been watching from your back window are carrying something right now that most people who look at them will never think to see. Stay with me from beginning to end because behavior number 6 is the one that researchers did not expect and the one that changes everything about how we understand what deer are. And the final one, number 8, is the one I think will stay with you the longest, especially the next time you count the deer at your treeline and come up one short. The first thing the deer do when one of their group does not return is the thing that most surprises people when they learn it. They count. Not the way you count, with numbers and language and the conscious awareness of arithmetic, but with something functionally equivalent to it, with the body's knowledge of how many familiar presences belong in this group, in this place, at this time, and with the body's immediate, precise registration of when that number is wrong. Researchers studying social cognition in white-tailed deer have found that does within a matrilineal family group demonstrate measurable behavioral responses to the absence of specific group members, responses that are distinct from their reactions to the presence of an unfamiliar deer and distinct from ordinary vigilance behavior. The response is not to something present, it is to something absent. The absence registers. She knows how many there should be. She has known since she was a fawn growing up in this specific group, learning the particular presence of each individual, the specific body, the specific smell, the specific movement pattern of each deer she has grazed beside for months or years. And when one of those presences is not there, she feels it. Not as grief, not in the human sense of that word, but as a wrongness in the composition of the group, a gap in the social body that the remaining animals can feel the way you can feel a missing tooth with your tongue. You know the shape of what belongs there, and you know when it is gone. She is standing at the edge of your yard tonight counting something you will never be able to count, and she already knows the answer is wrong. In the days after a deer does not come back, the remaining group returns to the last location where the missing animal was last present with them. Not because food is there, not because the spot has any particular resource value, because that is where she was, that is the last coordinate in their shared geography where her presence was part of the world. Researchers studying movement patterns in deer family groups after member loss have documented repeated visits to specific locations that correspond to last known association points of the missing animal, in the days and weeks following that animal's disappearance. The visits do not produce foraging behavior. They produce something closer to investigation or vigil, or the particular attentiveness of an animal that has not yet received the information it is looking for. The treeline spot where she always emerged, the corner of the field where she liked to graze in the last light, the gap in the fence she always used, the remaining deer return to these places, they stand in them, they read the air. She was here, the evidence of her presence, her scent, the worn path her hooves made, the particular way the grass was compressed at the spot she preferred persists for days, and the remaining deer read it the way you might read old letters, with the particular attention of someone who is not finding new information but is revisiting the information they already have, because the visiting itself is something they cannot stop doing yet. Every deer group has an order, not a rigid hierarchy in the simple sense but a practiced habitual arrangement, who emerges from cover first, who stands where during feeding, who moves when, who the others watch for cues about safety and departure. This order develops over months and seasons of shared life and becomes so embedded in the group's behavior that it looks, from the outside, like simple routine. When a deer is lost, the order breaks. Researchers studying deer group dynamics after population loss have found that the behavioral choreography of a deer group, the spatial arrangements, the emergent sequences, the inter-individual distances that a group maintains during feeding, shows significant disruption following the loss of a member. Particularly when the lost animal occupied a specific social role, such as a dominant doe, the disruption can persist for weeks. The deer you watch at your treeline have a specific order. You may have learned it without knowing you learned it. The way the larger doe always steps out first. The way the younger one follows at a specific distance. The way they arrange themselves in the field in a pattern that becomes, over time, as familiar as furniture. When one of them is gone, that order cannot simply shift to accommodate the absence. The other deer have learned their places relative to hers. They know where she should be standing, and the space where she should be is not just empty, it is wrong. A disruption in a pattern that their bodies remember even when she is not there to complete it. The deer at your treeline tonight may be standing in slightly the wrong places. And you would never know that unless you knew where they used to stand. When a deer is lost from a group, the remaining animals face an immediate practical reality alongside whatever else they are experiencing. They have lost a pair of eyes. A deer group is a collective sensory system. Each animal's attention covers ground that the others are not covering. Each animal's ears, eyes, and nose contribute to a shared awareness of the environment that no single animal could maintain alone. The group is safer than the sum of its parts precisely because the parts are always watching different things. Lose one of those parts and the whole system becomes less complete. Researchers studying predator vigilance in white-tailed deer have found that deer groups show measurably increased per-individual vigilance rates following the loss of a group member, each remaining animal spending more time in head-up, scanning posture and less time feeding. The calculation is straightforward. Fewer observers means each observer must watch more. The deer at your treeline in the days after a loss will eat less freely. They will lift their heads more often. They will spend more time at the forest edge before stepping into the open, reading the field more carefully before committing to the exposure that feeding requires. They will look more nervous than they used to. They are not more nervous. The world is not more dangerous than it was. They are simply doing more watching with fewer eyes. The vigilance that used to be shared is now divided among the remaining animals, and each one carries a heavier portion of it. The deer that looks tense at your field edge in the days after a group member disappears is not just missing a companion. She is missing a collaborator in the daily work of staying alive, and she feels the weight of that missing contribution in every moment she spends in the open. This is the one that people who have heard it never forget. Deer are not silent animals. They have a vocal range that most humans never encounter because most deer vocalization happens at volumes, frequencies, and in circumstances that the casual observer never witnesses. The contact calls between a doe and her fawn. The soft social grunts that deer use to maintain group cohesion in dense cover. The particular bleat, low, urgent, repeated that a deer uses when searching for a group member who is not where they should be. Researchers studying white-tailed deer vocalization have documented this searching call as a distinct behavioral element in the hours following group separation or loss. A repeated, low-frequency vocalization that carries further than the soft contact calls of normal group movement, and that functions as a locating signal, sent out into the landscape and listened for in return. She calls, in the hours after the separation, in the early evening at the forest edge at the last known locations. She calls, not loudly by human standards, but persistently. And she listens after each call with her whole body, ears forward, breath held, waiting for the response that identifies itself as the specific individual she is looking for. The response does not come. She calls again. If you have ever been in the field or the wood at dusk and heard a deer making a low, persistent, searching sound that seemed to be directed at nothing visible, you were hearing this. An animal broadcasting into the landscape for a specific presence that has gone from it, sending the signal and receiving only silence. She does this until the silence has been long enough, and then she stops, and the stopping is its own kind of thing. This is the one that researchers did not expect. And it is the one that changes everything about how we think about what deer are. Adult deer, researchers have found, show the behavioral disruptions associated with group member loss most intensely in the first days and weeks, and then Gradually, the group begins to reorganize, new patterns establish themselves, and the behavioral signature of the loss fades into the new normal. The young deer do not follow this pattern. Researchers studying developmental impacts of social loss in white-tailed deer have found that fawns and yearlings who lose a primary social companion, most significantly, a mother, show behavioral effects that persist significantly longer than the acute disruption period in adults. Changes in stress hormone levels, in exploratory behavior, in the willingness to venture into open ground, in the development of normal adult vigilance patterns, all of these are measurably affected in young deer who experience early social loss, and the effects can be traced for months. The young deer at the edge of your yard who lost her mother in the early summer does not look different from the other deer. She grazes in the same field, she uses the same treeline. She has attached herself to the remaining adult does and moves with the group. But inside the behavioral economics of her young life, something has been permanently recalculated. She watches differently. She ventures differently. She carries the absence of a specific presence in the way that young animals carry the absences that shape them, not as a memory exactly, but as a changed relationship with the world. A world that turned out to be the kind of place where someone who was supposed to be there simply was not one day and never was again. She does not understand this. She cannot, but she has been shaped by it in ways that will be visible in her behavior for the rest of her life. Life does not stop for the deer at your treeline. The seasons continue. The need to feed, to find water, to avoid predators, to navigate the landscape, none of it pauses because the group has lost a member. And so, in the weeks after the loss, the group does what living things must do. It reorganizes. A new emergence order establishes itself. A new spatial arrangement develops during feeding. New patterns of movement and proximity fill the shape that used to be occupied by the missing animal. The group rebuilds itself around the absence the way a tree grows around a wound, not pretending the wound was not there, but incorporating it into the structure of the new growth. Researchers studying long-term group dynamics in white-tailed deer have found that social reorganization following member loss can take anywhere from several weeks to a full season, depending on the social significance of the lost animal and the composition of the remaining group. A dominant doe is harder to replace than a peripheral animal. A mother is harder to replace than an ant. The deer you watch in the months after a loss will not look like grieving animals. They will look like deer. They will graze and move and emerge and retreat in all the ways they always have. But if you have watched them long enough to know their specific habits, their individual arrangements, their personal tendencies, the particular ways they moved as a group, you will see the difference. The new pattern has a quality of being constructed. The old pattern had a quality of being inhabited. She is rebuilding, in the small ways available to her. She is making a world that works without what it lost. And she is doing it without being asked, without being given a language for it, without anyone acknowledging what she is carrying. I have saved this one for last, because it is the one I think will stay with you the longest. The deer who have lost a member of their group, who have experienced the absence, the searching, the disruption, the slow reorganization, keep coming back. To your yard, to your treeline, to the field edge where you watch them from your kitchen window. They come back at dusk the way they have always come, in the diminished group that is now their group, and they graze in the last light the way they have always grazed. And if you did not know what had happened, you would not know anything had changed. Researchers studying long-term site fidelity in white-tailed deer have found that even following significant social disruption, loss of dominant individuals, fragmentation of family groups, deer maintain strong attachment to established home range areas. The loss of a group member does not displace the survivors. They stay. They keep coming back to the same places the lost animal knew, the same fields, the same tree lines, the same territories that were shaped in part by the one who is no longer with them. They come back because this is where they live. Because the loss of a member of their world does not make their world uninhabitable. Because the places that were good with her are still good without her, even though they are different now, even though they are changed in ways that cannot be fully measured. And so every evening as the light fails and the treeline darkens, they emerge. The smaller group, the reorganized order, the animals who are doing the invisible work of continuing in a world that is now permanently one less than it was. They come to the edge of your yard and they graze in the last light, and they look from your kitchen window exactly as they always have. And most people who watch them will see only deer at dusk. But you will know what it cost them to be there. You will know what they counted when they assembled at the treeline. You will know what they carry in their bodies in the changed vigilance, the reorganized order, the remembered places, the searching that eventually went quiet. You will know that the deer at the edge of your yard are not just animals grazing at dusk. They are survivors, coming back to a place that meant something in a group that is doing its best with what remains in the only way available to creatures who cannot say what they have lost but carry it anyway every evening in everything they do. That is not a story about deer. That is a story about what it means to keep going after loss. About the quiet courage of showing up at the same treeline at the same hour with one fewer beside you and grazing anyway. About the kind of loyalty that is not expressed in words but in the simple fact of return. They come back every evening, in the diminished light with the diminished number. They come back. Before I go, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer in the comments below. Have you ever counted the deer at your treeline and come up short, noticed the absence before you understood it, felt something off in the group before you could name what was different? Have you ever watched the deer at dusk and sensed, in the particular quality of their stillness, that something in their world had changed? Tell me about it. Where were you? What did it look like? What did it feel like to watch them in the light after that? The stories this hidden backyard wildlife community shares are some of the most extraordinary I read every week, and every single one of them matters. If anything in this video changed the way you will watch the deer emerge from your treeline tonight, if it changed the way you will count them, share it with someone who would understand. Sometimes the right perspective at the right moment changes what we notice for the rest of our lives. Thank you for being here at Hidden Backyard Wildlife. Tonight, when the light fades and the deer appear at the edge of your yard, count them, really count them, and then sit for a moment with what it means that they came back. They always come back. I will see you in the next one.